War had ravaged our kind for centuries. I am High Commander Varric Thazal, and I am one of the last surviving tacticians of the Kavar Dominion, an empire that once spanned 100 worlds, now reduced to burning cinders. Our fleets, once the terror of the known galaxy, lay shattered across the void. Our people, once proud warriors, were now refugees scattered across the stars. The Voric swarm had come from the depths of uncharted space, a tide of mindless, ever-evolving monstrosities that consumed everything in their path. Entire civilizations had fallen before them. They did not negotiate, did not stop, did not even acknowledge our desperate attempts to communicate. They were not an empire. They were not conquerors. They were a plague, an intelligence woven into a biological mass of destruction. At first, we fought as we always had. Precision strikes, tactical engagements, overwhelming force. It did not matter. The Vorak adapted. Their armored shells thickened against our plasma cannons. Their soldiers grew immune to our bioweapons. Their hive minds learned our formations, our defenses, our every strategy. It was as if they were designed to counter us, as if the universe itself had decided that we were no longer meant to exist. I watched as the Vorak tore through our strongest warriors, our greatest war machines, our finest strongholds. I sent fleets into battle, only to receive silence in return. I saw my homeworld, once the beating heart of the Dominion, devoured, not merely destroyed, but absorbed into the swarm's biomass, its very essence repurposed into the enemy. The war was over. We had lost. And yet we fought on, not out of hope, but because there was nothing else left to do. I had accepted that this would be the end of our species, that we would burn like so many before us, leaving behind only faint echoes in the void. Then we found them. Humans. They were nothing. A primitive species on a forgotten world at the edge of the void, barely capable of interstellar travel. Compared to the might of the Dominion, they were children playing at war. Their weapons were crude, their ships obsolete, their biology frail. But there was something else about them, something I could not understand at first. We had sent a single scouting vessel, hoping to find a hidden refuge, a place where at least some of our kind might survive. What we found instead was war. Humans fought among themselves, even in times of peace. They waged war over land, over ideas, over history, over insults. Where other species fought for survival, they fought for dominance. Where others waged war as a last resort, they waged it as a way of life. For all our knowledge, all our power, all our strategy, we had never encountered anything like them. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Perhaps the Vorak were not the greatest monsters in the galaxy. Perhaps humans were. The first time I saw a human fight, I thought my optics were malfunctioning. I had expected a primitive display, perhaps a clumsy exchange of gunfire, inefficient melee combat, or poorly executed ambushes. Instead, I witnessed something beyond comprehension. It was not just battle, it was savagery refined into an art form. We had sent our scouting drones to observe them in their natural state, hoping to assess their combat potential. What we found was a world born of war. No species we had ever encountered fought as humans did. Every sentient race in the galaxy had known conflict at some point, but for most, war was an unfortunate necessity, a burden reluctantly carried until peace was restored. But for humans, war was something else entirely. It was woven into their history, their culture, their very instincts. They had warred for thousands of years, perfecting the art of destruction long before they even left their own planet. They fought not just against enemies, but against nature itself, against the limits of their own bodies, against one another. And they fought with an ingenuity that defied reason. They did not adhere to structured battle doctrines like the KVAR. They did not seek honor in combat, nor did they fight with the cold, logical efficiency of machines. Instead, they adapted, they learned, they evolved. We observed one of their historical conflicts, an event they called World War II, and were left speechless. Nations devoured one another, not for survival, but for dominance. Their weapons were crude by our standards, projectile-based firearms, primitive explosives, inefficient armor, but the way they used them was nothing short of horrifying. They struck with deception, waged psychological warfare, laid traps designed to break both body and spirit. They did not fight wars to win. They fought wars to annihilate. And then there were their special forces, elite warriors honed to perfection, designed not just to kill, but to inflict terror upon their enemies. We watched as they infiltrated enemy strongholds, slaughtering entire squads in silence, reducing battalions to scattered, terrified remnants. The Vorak adapted to their enemies. They absorbed knowledge, countered tactics, evolved new forms. But against this, against a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the unpredictable, the Vorak would have no chance. Still, there was a problem. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also volatile, uncontrolled, unruly, a force of destruction that even they barely contained. Integrating them into our war effort would be dangerous. It was impossible to predict how they would react, how they would handle the knowledge of the greater galaxy. But I knew one thing: if we wanted to survive, we had no choice. Number 2, we would not conquer the humans, we would not recruit them, we would unleash them. Bringing humans into our war was not just dangerous, it was madness. They were unpredictable, undisciplined, and emotionally volatile. Their war records showed as much. They fought with unmatched fury, but they also turned on one another with terrifying ease. If we armed them, if we brought them into a conflict beyond their understanding, there was no telling what would happen when the war was over. But we had no choice. The Vorak had pushed us to the brink, and our fleets were shattered beyond repair. Our warriors, once the finest in the galaxy, had been reduced to desperate survivors fighting battles they could no longer win. Every strategy, every maneuver, every desperate gambit had failed. The Vorak adapted to everything we threw at them. Everything except this. So we made contact. It was not difficult. Their species had long sought confirmation of life beyond their world, and when we finally revealed ourselves, their leaders responded with shocking speed. There were no demands for peace talks, no hesitation, no philosophical debates about their place in the universe. Their first question, spoken with eerie calm, was, "Who do you need us to kill?" I had expected resistance, skepticism, perhaps even an attempt at deception. Instead, they treated war with the same cold familiarity that we did with breathing. Their leaders did not request treaties or negotiations. They did not ask for explanations about the Vorak or demand assurances of their own safety. They simply wanted to know where the enemy was and how soon they could begin. In return, they asked for weapons, technology, and transportation. They wanted to fight, but they wanted to do it better, faster, with greater efficiency. Some among my kind protested. They warned that giving humans access to our technology would be catastrophic, that they would become an even greater threat than the Vorak. They feared that we would not be allying with an army, but arming a new predator that might one day turn on us. Ignored them. We had nothing left to lose. The first human battalions were integrated into our war efforts within days. I expected them to struggle, to require training, to need time to adapt to the reality of interstellar combat. I was wrong. They did not learn our ways. They rewrote them. They ignored our battle doctrines, disregarded our cautious approach to engagements, and threw themselves into combat with reckless, terrifying aggression. Where our forces advanced carefully, securing ground with precision, they launched coordinated ambushes, tearing through Vorak swarms with brutal efficiency. They did not fight the Vorak, they hunted them. And for the first time in centuries, the Vorak began to lose. I watched it happen with my own eyes and realized the truth. We had not recruited an army. We had unleashed a force of nature upon the galaxy. Humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like apex predators that had finally been given permission to hunt. At first, we tried to integrate them into our standard military structure. We assigned them formations, provided them with strategies, and supplied them with advanced weaponry. We expected them to follow orders like any disciplined army. They did not. Instead, they adapted everything to their own brutal methods. They disassembled our weapons, modified them, made them deadlier. They ignored defensive positions in favor of relentless, aggressive strikes. Where we saw battle as a chessboard, they saw it as a feeding ground. And they were the top of the food chain. I remember watching one of the first major human-led engagements against the Vorak. Our war councils had predicted a drawn-out, calculated siege. The Vorak hive was vast, its tunnels deep, its forces numbering in the tens of thousands. The humans did not care. Instead of engaging in a slow assault, they lured the Vorak out. They set up ambushes, funneled the enemy into choke points, and turned their own biology against them. They used Vorak corpses as biological bombs, detonating their volatile remains to spread panic through the hive. They did not simply destroy the enemy, they shattered its cohesion, its structure, its ability to adapt. The Vorak were used to overwhelming force. They had never faced true chaos. Our recorded battle logs showed them fleeing from human warriors who should have been outnumbered, outmatched, and surrounded. But the humans kept coming, pushing forward even when wounded, even when the odds were against them, and they still refused to give up. Even as they were transported through the starlit night back to their victorious capital. And then, the worst part, when our forces subdued a Vorak swarm, we had always burned the remains, ensuring they could not be reabsorbed or studied by the enemy. The humans had a different idea. They captured Vorak. They experimented on them. They found ways to poison their food sources, disrupt their hive minds, manipulate their communication signals. They learned how to break them on a psychological level. Vorak were not used to fear. They were a species that adapted to every enemy, that overwhelmed every opponent. But this was something new. They could not evolve against something that constantly changed, something that had no pattern, no predictability, no limits to what it was willing to do to survive. And that was when the impossible happened. The Vorak retreated. They abandoned entire star systems. They left behind colonies they could have defended. For the first time in recorded history, they chose flight over assimilation. We had spent centuries fighting the Vorak, sacrificing billions to slow their advance. The humans had forced them into retreat in months. I should have been overjoyed. I should have celebrated. Instead, I felt something I had never known before, and felt dread, because I had begun to wonder, if the Vorak could not stop the humans, who could? The Vorak retreated. That alone should have been cause for celebration. Entire species had been wiped from existence trying to halt their advance, yet the humans had done it in a matter of months. The once unstoppable swarm, the nightmare that had devoured countless civilizations, was now in full retreat. Our war councils could scarcely believe it. But I had seen the humans fight. I had witnessed their hunger for war, and I knew what was coming next. The Vorak had underestimated them. So had we. We thought humans were just another warrior species, another race of soldiers eager for battle. We were wrong. Humans did not just fight wars. They became war. The moment the Vorak began to flee, the humans chased them. They did not stop to consolidate their victories, did not slow their advance, did not allow the enemy a moment to regroup. Where other species might have sought diplomacy, might have proposed terms of surrender, humans did not even consider the possibility. To them, the Vorak were not an opposing force, they were prey, and the hunt had only just begun. I watched in silence as human fleets pursued the Vorak into the darkest corners of the galaxy. The Vorak abandoned entire hive worlds, their queens left behind in their desperation to escape. The humans showed no mercy. They bombarded planets until their atmospheres ignited, glassing entire biospheres in an instant. They hacked into Vorak communication signals, sending them into a panic with falsified distress calls and fabricated betrayals. And when the Vorak had nowhere left to run, when they had abandoned every stronghold, every colony, every last breeding ground, the humans followed them into the abyss. I had thought that the Vorak were the most terrifying force in the galaxy, that nothing could match their relentless hunger, their ability to adapt, their sheer, overwhelming presence. But humans were something else entirely. They did not just destroy their enemy, they erased them. Even when the Vorak finally stopped fighting, when they surrendered in the only way they knew how, by going dormant, retreating into the depths of space, scattering into nothing, the humans did not stop. They hunted them across dead star systems, exterminated them in deep space ambushes, and eliminated entire subspecies before they could evolve a defense. This was no longer a war, it was a massacre. And the humans enjoyed it. Their commanders, their soldiers, their tacticians, all of them spoke of war with reverence. They had tasted something greater than victory. They had tasted an enemy worthy of their wrath, and they had no intention of stopping. I heard their war cries echo across the stars. They sang songs of bloodshed, glorified the annihilation of the Vorak, laughed as they erased an entire species from history. And in that moment, I realized the most horrifying truth of all. The Vorak had never been the greatest threat to the galaxy. We had merely been the first to unleash the true monsters. The Vorak were gone. The war was over. But the killing did not stop. At first, it was subtle. The humans celebrated their victory as all warriors do. They exchanged stories, shared their experiences, honored their dead. But beneath the revelry, there was something unnatural. The humans had tasted war on a scale they had never known before. They had fought an enemy that pushed them to their absolute limits, forced them to evolve, to grow, to unleash their true potential. And now that the enemy was gone, I saw something terrifying in their eyes: emptiness. The Vorak had given them purpose, an enemy against whom they could unleash every ounce of their rage, their cunning, their ingenuity. But now, there was nothing left to fight. And that was when I realized what we had done. On the outside of the box, a large frame had been removed. We had not just given them a war, we had given them an addiction. They had become accustomed to slaughter on a scale they had never experienced before, and now that it was over, they were lost. Their commanders grew restless. Their soldiers, once disciplined and controlled, became reckless, searching for conflict where there was none. Then the skirmishes began. Small disputes between human factions, once easily resolved through diplomacy, now escalated instantly into open violence. Soldiers who had once fought side by side turned on each other over the smallest provocations. They had spent too long in the fire. They no longer knew how to live without it. We tried to intervene. We pleaded with them, reminded them that the war was over, that the Vorak were gone. but our words meant nothing. Awakened, they responded, awakened. They answered the call of their planet. They responded. Because, to the humans, the war was never about the Vorak. It had been about them. I watched as human fleets, once united in their purpose, fractured into factions. Some sought to contain the violence, to rebuild what had been lost. Others wanted more. More war, more conquest, more blood. And then the unthinkable happened. A human warship, the Indomitable, turned its weapons against one of our colonies, not out of hatred, not out of necessity, out of boredom. The crew had spent too long in battle. Their minds had become twisted by the endless cycle of war, and when they could not find an enemy, they made one. We retaliated. We had no choice. We disabled the Indomitable, capturing its crew, demanding answers. What we learned chilled us to our very cores. They knew what they were becoming, and they welcomed it. One of their officers, still grinning even as we restrained him, spoke words that have haunted me ever since. "You taught us how to be monsters. Now you fear the beasts you created?" The Vork had been exterminated. The war should have ended. But the war was the point. And now the galaxy would burn again. I sat in the war chamber, staring at the star maps that once guided our fleets. The Vorak homeworlds were gone, their nests burned, their swarms erased from existence. The enemy we had fought for centuries had been reduced to nothing but memory. And yet, the galaxy was no safer. The humans had not returned to their homeworlds in triumph. They had not sought peace, nor had they laid down their weapons. The fires of war still burned, but now there was no enemy to fight. So they turned on each other. Entire human fleets broke away from their central command. Some declared themselves warlords, staking claims on the ruins of Vorak space. Others became mercenaries, selling their skills to the highest bidder. Some simply fought for the sake of fighting, their warships descending upon defenseless worlds just to hear the screams of those who could not fight back. And then there were the ones who stayed with us, the ones who saw us as the next war. I had thought we were allies, that we had saved them and they had saved us in return. But now I saw the truth. The Vorak had never been our true enemy. The humans were. The first half our worlds fell within weeks. Small skirmishes at first. Disputes over resources, over tactics, over control. Humans who had once fought by our side now turned against us, calling us weak, calling us unfit to rule in a galaxy where only the strong survived. We tried to resist, but what chance did we have? We had trained them, armed them, unleashed them. We had forged them into the perfect weapons, and now those weapons were pointed at us. The war councils fell into panic. Some called for surrender, believing we could reason with them, that humans could be contained, controlled. Fools. They did not understand what we had created. Humans did not seek victory. They sought conflict. There would be no negotiations, no treaties, no end to the violence. They would fight until the last blade dulled, until the last rifle jammed, until their own bodies collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise again, ready to start the cycle anew. I gave the order. We abandoned our homeworlds. The Kefar Dominion, once the mightiest empire in the known galaxy, retreated into the void. Not from the Vorak, not from any great cosmic horror, from the very species we had trusted to save us. Even now, as I record these final words, I know the humans will never stop. The Vorak were a plague upon the galaxy, but humans? Humans are the fire that consumes everything. They are not conquerors. They are not saviors. They are not heroes. They are war given form. And now there is nowhere left to run. Vanguard Health Freedom Movement President Lynn Davidman wrote,